Hello again. This is part two of just a little conversation I wanted to put out this week and hopefully just get a little better clarity on some of the things that's going on right now. And so previously I talked about Donald Trump's second round of impeachment, and so um, it's really something that is kind of interesting. But I pretty much said my piece on it. You know, I've already said you know. Uh, Wealthy people don't get punished in our country, especially politicians, because it would just set a dangerous precedent, I think, going forward, that if you can punish an ex-president who's no longer in office for something that he did that's questionable, then you can pretty much do it to anyone. And I think that they didn't really want to set that precedent because if you set that precedent, then people who are still in Congress or soon to be leaving Congress would be subject to those same rules as well, especially Nancy Pelosi and other members of Congress who were complicit in the Iraq War fiasco, who knowingly knew that there were no weapons of mass destruction, but they still proceeded on anyway. But no one in our politics gets held accountable or punished for the mistakes that they make. But the people, whenever they decide to rise up for the atrocities that our government commits, they are put down. So um, something I just wanted to talk about quickly was the I guess Congress kind of pushing for these um, new police state measures or something like that, new security apparatus. And this is the greatest fear I had after, like, the few days after the Capitol riots were that, there's always going to be an overreaction from political actors. And it is sad to say that, this is kind of the steps that lead on to more control, more authoritarianism, and just outright fascism because of the government's inability to be the solution for a lot of people's problems. And I don't think the government can solve everyone's problem. If you haven't had a job in 10 years or 12 years or something like that, that's not really the government's responsibility. But for the large part of society and people who have recently lost their jobs, that's largely due in part to government. And so I think the government's inaction and further crackdown and just overall inability to actually respond to the needs of people and further oppression really is gonna lead to really bad consequences. And I say that because a lot of things that happened on January 6th, we don't really need any little new laws to prosecute those people. You can prosecute them under, the current laws and statutes that we have right now, where many of them, participated in a riot that was unlawful and created hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of maybe even possibly millions of dollars of damage. And so, and it's also resulted in several people actually losing their life. One directly, obviously, but it's just a sad case to see that this new restrictions on people's association and ability to communicate is going to and free association in general is going to be clamped down on when you see it in Robin Hood and things like that in the whole GameStop fiasco where the elites really don't want they really don't want you to win the game because that's what they see it as. They see it as them winning and everyone else losing. And whenever, the little guy or a group of small little guys decide to stand up and roll the dice and actually beat them at their own game, the elites don't like that because it costs them money, especially if it's at their expense. They're not just willing to stick to the rules. They want to change the rules or better yet, how the rules favor them in the end. And so you're definitely seeing a more militaristic presence in DC, which is kind of alarming. But I don't really know what that means for the future of the United States. I think that we're definitely already militaristic, and it's just gonna be a continual downward spiral. I don't really want to make any comparisons to Rome. I think probably a more anachronistic comparison would probably be China. Is that China was, the Middle Kingdom. It was, I believe, the Tang Dynasty or the Han Dynasty. But they became very militaristic, overspreading themselves, and eventually it all just collapsed. Um, and there was obviously a variety of factors that led to that. Just the disintegration of certain regions of that dynasty or dynasties, and really just the inability to assimilate these desperate groups or far-flung regions of their empire into the core region of that state and or civilization. And so I think that's where we're right now. We're not really able to integrate a lot of these people, whether it's QAnon people or um, Trumpers or even just the far left. Like I think the far left right now is also being isolated as well. But the biggest fear, isn't it when the leftists um uh when the leftists decide to go rogue, is really the conservatives. It's really people. And I think obviously in the United States you don't want those two elements combining at once. Um, because we already know the elites don't really care all that much about the average everyday people, obviously, because of just the way that their inaction is towards direct payments and things like that. They really haven't decided on doing that. But we could definitely see a very police state driven federal government, similar to what's done in France now, where you can't even take pictures of police uh, in the public streets because for some odd reason police don't feel safe when you take their picture. But hey, you know, teach his own, and I think that's going to ultimately lead to the doom of many of the people who are, most affected by that. And I also want to bring up one other thing is also in Congress, Mitt Romney, senator from Utah and former presidential candidate and former governor of Massachusetts, has proposed a poverty program where families will receive about $3,000 for per child, I believe, throughout their lives. I think it might have been $300 a month or something like that, which is a substantial amount of money for most people. But it's just I don't know if that's gonna really get a lot of headway in the Congress that we have right now. But I think it's a great idea. I think especially right now, it's much better than giving out a UBI to every American. But especially the most vulnerable in our society, children, are facing poverty, and I believe the United States leads the way of industrialized countries per capita and overall numbers of children who live either at or below the poverty line. So, giving to these children a head start is really something I think you know is a great idea, especially even pre-COVID and now post-COVID. I think children deserve this little leg up, and I believe a child tax credit of this much money is probably substantial. So, for children to get this throughout their life for their care and upkeep is a great idea. And Mitt Romney should be given all the credit if this does get through Congress and ultimately gets a vote. So, it's just something to think about that in these times we couldn't really get a lot of these things done that could be meaningful to people. And I know that he's probably going to eliminate some programs. I think TAF is a program for families, needy families with children, and that program will probably be eliminated. You know, but I think it's a step in the right direction. I think if you can get the nuts and bolts of it worked out, it's something that could ultimately, be a beneficial thing. And so let's just see. And I guess one other thing I just want to talk about is just cancel culture. Recently, Disney had fired actress and former MMA superstar Gina Carano. And so the danger with cancel culture is that I just don't think it really works. And I think for the longest time we had PC culture, which tried to correct some of the things that people would say, like we're not supposed to say Indians anymore, we're supposed to say Native Americans, or we don't say black people, we say African American, and things like that. And you just want to be politically correct about some things. But I think PC culture is pretty much dead. I think the thing that's in vogue now is just to cancel people who have wrong ideas or have the wrong ideology, and it's mostly happening to conservatives, but it's also, I believe, going to be a tool used against the left, and it has been used against the left. Look at the people that supported Bernie Sanders, and many of the socialists in politics are being, canceled as well. And I think, you don't have to look that far back in American history for that to happen. You saw it happen in the Vietnam era when people spoke out against the war; they were blackballed. You saw it during the MacArthur era of the 1950s and and even into the early 60s. People being smeared as communists just because they had ideas that were counter to the mainstream of American policy. And you even saw it in the early 20th century during the Wilson administration, where people were, silenced for speaking out against the government during wartime. And so, Sedition Act is very real and it can be used for a positive or a negative thing. And so people just have to understand that these things do have consequences. And most importantly, right now, it's not necessarily the government that's censoring principle. It's the, tech monopolies and large corporations that are censoring people. And so that is something that, you have to really think about in the long term. That do we want to give these type of companies that kind of power? YouTube, especially Facebook, Google, Amazon, and all these things have the power to erase people for wrong think. And do we really want those things propagated in our society? Especially, I'm of the belief that the only way to combat bad ideas or bad speech is with good speech and good ideas. And so you're going to definitely see that coming forward in the forefront. And I think that people have to be mindful that uh, we can't let this stand, especially not from our government and especially not from corporations who are um, who have created platforms that are basically monopolies. And you see this in the papers, and you saw this in the election where they canceled stories about Hunter Biden and his drug use and his obviously his nepotism and the soft corruption that he has expressed in the time of his father being vice president and even probably during his time as senator. And so, and you also see it with the Julian Assange is that he spoke truth to power and spoke about and published some of the atrocities that the American military and armed forces were committing in Iraq. And so we have to be not afraid to do and step up to these challenges that we now face. And so I don't really know what the correct solution is. Is it to break up these monopolies, or is it to regulate them, or is it to turn them into public utilities? I don't really know what the correct solution is, but if you have any ideas, just leave them in the comment box below and just give me some insight into what you think the best way to fix a lot of these problems is, because I think we're right now in the wilderness. And so, hopefully we come out of the darkness into the light. And I just like to say this. This has been Brian with a Y, the political nomad, signing out.